Hanukkah public displays removed amidst rising tensions. In response to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas, several cities in the United States and Canada have canceled Hanukkah celebrations and removed Jewish symbols from public display, sparking controversy. In Williamsburg, Virginia, the Second Sunday's Art and Music Festival's founder, Shirley Vermillion, canceled a menorah lighting, citing the inappropriateness of the display during the Israel-Hamas conflict. This decision was met from the United Jewish Community of Virginia Peninsula, which stated, quote, "We should be very clear. It is anti-Semitic to hold Jews collectively responsible for Israel's policies and action and to require a political litmus test for Jews' participation in community events that have nothing to do with Israel. Those standards would never be applied to another community." Oh yeah, because I forgot an important detail. They decided to pull a menorah display, and then they told the community, oh yeah, you know what? You can go ahead and do your menorah display, but only if you do it literally underneath a banner that calls for a ceasefire. Then you're allowed to light your menorah.
What are you telling me? This isn't real.
Yes. This is in the United
States. This is not real.
This is in the United States.
No.
So again, Jews, you're allowed to hold your religious celebrations in public as long as you do a political purity test. Then it's okay.
Serious?
Then it's okay for you to be publicly Jewish. Disgusting. Disgusting. In Westbrook, Maine, a Star of David was replaced with a dreidel holiday light display after complaints from Arab American residents about its association with the Israeli flag. Mayor Michael Foley justified the change as a legal requirement under the U.S. Constitution's Establishment Clause. Okay, that's all well and good. We do have the Establishment Clause. But when you only start to apply it this year, during this time, people are going to look at you sideways for good reason. People are going to look at you sideways for good reason. When, oh, it used to be fine, but now it's not because Establishment Clause now? Give me a break. Similarly, a Canadian town did not display a menorah outside its city hall for the first time in 20 years, citing a 2015 Supreme Court ruling. Again, the first time in 20 years, but this ruling came down in 2015. I'm looking at you sideways. Francis Weil of the Moncton Jewish Community highlighted the decision's unfairness and its impact on the Jewish community. The UK's Havering Council had also initially decided against lighting the menorah in this year's Hanukkah celebrations, but reversed the decision after discussions with Jewish community leaders. And again, they said, in the UK situation, they basically said, oh, well, we don't want to do Hanukkah. We don't want to have menorah celebrations in public right now because it seems inappropriate. We don't want to increase tensions. We don't want to increase tensions. So who's responsible for increasing tensions here? Just normal Jews having their religious holiday celebrations, or who's maybe responsible for increasing tensions? The people who are threatening to vandalize those displays. How about we hold the perpetrators accountable instead of just painting the Jews as who are the victims of this persecution, painting them as responsible for the persecution of the people against them? You know who's inflaming tensions? The people running around the streets of London holding Daesh and ISIS signs, holding Taliban flags. The people running around the streets of London calling for a final solution. That's who's freaking increasing tensions. Not just Jews being publicly Jewish in public and celebrating their holidays, as is their right. Now, given laws and stuff, maybe they do not technically have a right to do it on a government property. You know, there's different kind of rules about that in different countries. In the US, the way that comes down is, well, if you celebrate one religious holiday on government property, then you have to celebrate all on government property, right? That's the way that the US handles it. So doing it on government property is one thing, but just having generalized community public displays that are now suddenly being taken down for these reasons, it's so virulently disgusting. And you're basically telling Jews to get back in the closet. Stop being publicly Jewish, sit down and assimilate. It's so disgusting. But Armin, before I want to show you a few videos that I think are important to watch. But what is your initial reaction?
I was gonna say something that Zaid and Dee said before me, because I was gonna say, can you imagine this happening after the October 7th attack as a response, not having the call to prayer, for example, saying like it's tasteless right now after the October 7th attack.
Yeah, I don't
To
see that being
have,
canceled in New York, where now it's now legal to do the call to prayer.
Can you even imagine that happening? Nobody would dare. Nobody would dare say, like, okay, no azan in mosques because it would be tasteless after the October 7th attack. Unless, how about this? Imagine if they came out and said, you're allowed to have your azan, the call to prayer, if you condemn Hamas. They would never do that.
Exactly. They don't have the balls.
They would never do that, which makes me think this is Jew hatred. Can you think of anything else that explains this double standard other than Jew hatred? Am I imagining things here?
No.
Hmm.
No. And it's so sad. There
Yeah.
are Jewish communities around the country, around the world, who are willfully making the decision to take their menorah displays down publicly. That's a different matter, where they are internally making that decision. They're making that decision as a community that this is what we want to do, right? But even so, that is so sad to me. And I put a couple of things in the private chat that I want you to show, Armin, if you could pull those up. Because basically, I understand the impetus, because they don't want, oh, please, can you pause that for a second? So I understand the impetus because they don't want to basically make themselves vulnerable to attacks. They don't want to make themselves vulnerable to vandalism. And I'm not here to tell anyone, especially in such a persecuted community, how they should be behaving for their own safety. But my reaction, and again, this is as an outsider, I appreciate that, is no, have those symbols up. Because if they are vandalized, people need to see that sentiment and attitude is alive and well in the heart of their community. They need to see how visible it is. If people are going to invite this kind of attacks and vandalism into their life, then they need to be prosecuted for their crime. The Jewish people are not committing a crime by having a menorah outside their synagogue, as a little holiday display. That's not a crime. They don't need to be policing their behavior as if they're the ones doing something wrong. If they are exercising their right to have that display on their own property, that is well within their right. If other people come and vandalize that, that's a crime. They should be prosecuted accordingly. So it shows you how far we've fallen when people who are at the subject of these attacks are the ones adjusting their behavior accordingly, instead of the authorities being proactive in ensuring that they can have their public displays in the same way that any other, I'm going to speak as an American, in the same way that any other American can. It's so reprehensible. Yeah, Dia is saying the US has the highest number of Jews outside of Israel, and look at the protests and chants that are allowed. How do you think Jews feel right now? If I was a Jewish person, I would legitimately be terrified.
You know what this shows?
What?
The legitimacy of Zionism. The fact that Jews,
it always comes back to, this is why they need to protect themselves. This is why they need an army to protect them.
This is why they need their country. Because even in the United States, which is supposed to be their main ally, people are like, oh, why did they need their own country? They were safe in the US. Well, were they? I mean, they were safe in Germany before Adolf took over. It was the best place to be a Jew, right? And again, these events all over Europe and North America, again, shows that Zionism was right. Jews need their own country because they can't trust anybody.
Yeah. Jean, who I think is in Israel, saying, D, I can tell you how they feel. This has been the largest aliyah, which means like the coming to homeland or basically immigrating to Israel, for Jewish people from Western countries. But this is not necessarily fighting you on this, but are people making aliyah for the first time, or are they coming back to serve as reservists? Because I know that Israel is probably the only country in the world where, when faced with a war, there are more people entering the country to come fight for that country versus flee. I've never seen anything like it before, actually. So is it that, or is it actually people making aliyah for the first time? I'd be very curious. But can you bring forward that first Instagram thing that I brought? And I just thought that this was a really important perspective to bring in, and make sure to turn on the audio. Rudy Rochman is a Israeli activist, and actually he's currently serving as a reservist right now. I really liked what he had to say about being publicly Jewish, and I think it captures the sentiment really well.
For American Jews and in the diaspora, there's a certain mentality of staying low, putting on the baseball cap of wherever you're going and keeping quiet. I don't have to tell you what we're seeing in New York right now.
I always had a Magen David my whole life, and my grandparents would tell me, tuck in your Magen David. You can't go out in public with your Magen David. And I didn't really have the words then to explain why I refused to do so. But now I understand how dangerous it is to tuck in your Magen David. Because although as an individual, you might be minimizing the potential risk of an attack because nobody would in that moment be able to tell that you're Jewish. When we start to do that, we start to accept as a collective that this is okay, that this is just a reality we have to live with. And when you don't fight back anti-Semitism, it will get worse. And so it's actually much more dangerous as the collective to do that as individuals than it is for the dangers of the individuals if they continue to do that. And so the reality is very simple. If you are a Jew living in the diaspora, you stand up, you fight back, and you win. You win the cultural war, you win the respect. And if you're not here to win, you leave immediately and you come home to Israel. That's it. There is no other equation. There is no other option. Either you come home because you can't do your job, or you stand up and you do your job.
If we don't stand up for ourselves, no one else is. That's the bottom line.
What do you think of that sentiment?
But I like the message, but I don't like telling people what they have to do. I don't like the ultimatum, because I think our goal is to let people live. So not everybody has to be a soldier. Not everybody has to be an activist. We want Jews to be able to just live their goddamn lives without having to fight all the time. Like the purpose of the people who fight, the purpose of the people who do activism is so that other people get to just live their goddamn lives. I love what he's saying. Just minor adjustment. I don't like the idea that you have to do this as a Jew. Like this is your responsibility because you're a Jew. I think you individually decide what your responsibilities are for yourself. I think like it should be more in line of an encouragement and invitation rather than this is what you have to do. I don't like people telling Jewish people that they have to do something because they're a Jew, even if they themselves are a Jew. That's the only part that I would adjust. But everything he said, if it was in the form of a suggestion and an encouragement, that was fantastic. Just a slight minor change in it. Does that make sense?
Totally. I wonder. My gosh. So wait, scroll up and read the caption, or I'll read the caption. So this is a video I found on Twitter, and to be fair, for this specific video, I can't corroborate this, but so it's saying, Los Angeles, as Jews were lighting candles last night for Shabbat and the second night of Hanukkah, mobs of anti-Semites took to the street to chant anti-Semitic slogans in graffiti buildings, including synagogues. This particular location is the epicenter of Persian Jewish life on the Wilshire corridor. Grandparents and parents were all hearing the same Jewish death chants they heard during the Iranian Islamic Revolution some 44 years ago, forcing them to flee their homes of 2,000 plus years.
Should I play the video?
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing that and then the next video I think is really, really important. One thing that I think is just so, like, people just use Zionist as synonymous with Jewish constantly, and this is a perfect example of this. So here we see a guy scaling a giant menorah display with the Palestinian flag to vandalize it. So when you see just a normal ass menorah display and someone feels the need to go vandalize it and plant a Palestinian flag on top, when the claims that anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitic fall flat on their face pretty fast. So when people are talking about anti-Zionism or being against the Zionists, we need to go root out the Zionists, we need to go find the Zionists, blah, blah, blah. Like, I am looking at them with incredible scrutiny because it is almost completely just Jews. There were women in the universe. I heard about this in my workplace. I think it might have been at Michigan State. I'm not exactly sure. But there were Jewish women that were kicked out of a sexual assault survivors group because they were accused of being Zionists.
It's incredible. That means that's just because the only way that they were identifying them as Zionists was their Jewishness, right?
Yeah, or maybe they had Israeli citizenship. Anything. It's so vehemently disgusting. So vehemently disgusting.
By the way, let me actually be clear. We are not.
Your sexual assault doesn't count if you're painted as a Zionist. Well, newsflash, guys.
Let me say something. I am pro Israel. I'm pro Zionism as well. Like, I understand when we are saying that by Zionists, by saying that we're anti-Zionism, they actually mean they're anti-Jewish, but they can't say that, so they say anti-Zionism. That, to me, I just want you to understand, I'm not saying it's okay to be anti-Zionism. Zionism is a legitimate movement, and I support it. I support both Jewish people and beyond Jewish people. I support Zionism as a movement. So just understand that we're not saying like, oh, they're actually anti-Jewish because it's okay to just be anti-Zionism. Zionism is just nationalism for Israel. That's what Zionism is. Nationalism for Israel. And nationalism could have many forms that are radical and not legitimate, but there are nationalism as a whole is a important and positive force. We have civic nationalism, which is very important to have. I mean, the concept of a nation state is literally what have saved us from constant war between powerful forces around the globe, and defending the concept of nation state for every country. That's nationalism. And nationalism for Israel is called Zionism. So I support Zionism because I support nationalism for every single country. But I know there are versions of Zionism that are completely insane, but that doesn't make the whole thing insane as a whole. The whole thing is a legitimate movement.
Yeah, but also, I mean, I try to be charitable and also nuanced. There are ways to critique Zionism in a very constructive, legitimate way. It's just that that's a
certain versions of it.
Exactly. That's a needle in a haystack of just virulent anti-Semitism. And it's become like, it has never been more apparent in my life. Like, I want to tell people, when I was a militant lefty, when I was an anarchist, like when I was in Antifa, I had a friend of mine from college who was one of my closest friends, who was way more radical than me. And I remember having a conversation with her where she literally said, you know, I've changed my mind about asking Jews how they feel about Israel. So she had gotten to a place where she was openly saying that, you know what, I actually think that it's acceptable and okay and not bigoted to make Jews do a political litmus test to see if they're my ally, to see if they're acceptable within my groups. That's a statement, because I know how these anarchists and our Antifa work. If you have anything that they think is a smear against you, they'll kick you out and dox you.
We should play this video.
Yeah. So for people who are listening, Like I said earlier, it's a guy climbing a giant menorah display with a Palestinian flag, and there are people trying to stop him. Oh, it's pro-Palestinian protesters. It's pro-Palestinian protesters that are getting him to try to take it down. Because did you hear that? They said it makes it look bad for us. They will pay us.
Oh, I didn't notice that. We have a ton of super chats. Thank you guys. That's very generous.
Oh my lord. Yeah.
People. Yeah. So let's go through those.
Yeah. Erican, thank you for the super chat, saying the phrase self-delete is better than the actual phrase LOL. Zaid is saying, I wonder if they're going to ban Eid celebrations and Ramadan festivals as well, but I bet that only applies to Jews.
That's what.
Yeah, exactly. Can you imagine? Raziel gave us $5. Thank you. Saying, when attacking Israel, they make sure to say Israel and Jews aren't the same. When attacking Jews, they say Jews and Israel are all the same. Yep, it's a common pattern. Bull is saying they'll be sorry when Hanukkah is unleashed. So I looked this up, and it's a condor, like the vulture, just with a little yarmulke.
Okay.
The Jewish condors, the Jew will be released. It's like a meme. Raziel also said, I now visibly wear the Magen David. I didn't before. Good for you. Don't be afraid. Unicorn gave us $2, saying, thank you, Susan Armin. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Gasian is raising a contention to you, Armin, saying, is Khalistan not nationalism?
Well, last time I checked, there was not a nation state called Khalistan. So no, it's not nationalism, and it's against the nation state that is officially there, which is India. So no, it's not nationalism, it's anti-nationalism, because India does exist as a nation state and Khalistan doesn't.
Sakai is saying patriotism, guys, not nationalism.
No, nationalism. Civic nationalism.
Yeah.
I am.
Patriotism is basically civic nationalism. Patriotism is like positive nationalism.
That word has different meanings for many different people.
That's
right?
true.
But nationalism has, at least civic nationalism has a very official meaning, a legal meaning, official meaning. And civic nationalism is something that I completely endorse. And I know there are certain types of nationalism that are radical and that we do not support, but civic nationalism is a very powerful and important force that we do support.
Yeah. This comment by Weasel is so funny. Saying, I prefer decolonize yourself to delete yourself.
No, hey guys, don't say that. Don't make light of this. It's not good. Jesus Christ. Thank you everybody for all the super chats. We really appreciate this. It's really helping us keep the channel going. So thank you. All right, so the last news, we get to laugh a little bit after going through all that heavy. Jesus Christ, yes. Thank you, Susie, for making us end on a happy, fun note.
This is just silly.
Do you know who makes the most amazing, gorgeous, and other adjectives that I can't use here on YouTube, blasphemous art ever? We do! And for some reason, we are giving it away for free. Download them now using the link in the description before we change our mind.